Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We're going to get started. We are recording, and thanks for being here today.
Dun, dun, dun. Welcome one and all to the next steps to sustainability, where you get to learn action steps. How do you become more sustainable in your business, your life, and your organization? Not so much on the personal life, that's a bunch of other really great groups, but we have you covered as far as organizational design, keeping sustainability sexy, and what brings you here today, which is talking about legal sustainability, because as it turns out, we are operating, surprise, surprise, in a world built on extractive colonial capitalism. Therefore, our legal systems are built to succeed in those, our legal structures are built to succeed under those conditions. So if we are going to evolve the world and move from a linear economy to a circular economy that is actually regenerative and not awful to live in, that means we need to evolve our systems as well. So before I get too started on that, my name is Anna Burrell. My business partner is Vicki Davis, and we are Twiggs Co. So we start our events, or in them depending, with land acknowledgements, because as it turns out, we're trying not to perpetuate the problem. So our land acknowledgement, if you will allow to the space and then also join us in this, Twiggs Co. is a women-led, Denver-based sustainability consulting and implementation firm. We work to broaden the everyday lens of sustainability and the impact that it can have. By tripling bottom lines, we create and implement corporate social responsibility programs that increase the impact an organization, a business, and/or a movement can have. This in turn helps us fulfill our mission of helping to facilitate the shift from the economy that we have to an economy that actually serves the people existing within it. I know, crazy, what have you. We are here to disrupt the status quo. And sometimes that means that we disrupt ourselves. So if you find yourself triggered, perfect. That is an entry point that helps us find our biases, our blind spots, and specifically what we need to improve. We're not here to run away from bad feelings. We are here to face them and do better next time. So Twiggs Co. is founded in Denver, Colorado, on the occupied lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux nations. So to acknowledge this, our next steps are to learn how to say the names listed properly and then bring land acknowledgements to life, bring them off paper and make them more than just words. And one of the ways that we're doing this is we're partnering with Sydney Jackson Tloxton of Citrine Unlimited to create a respectful and immersive cultural experience currently scheduled for the first weekend in August of 2022. So if you're interested in learning more about that land acknowledgement experience or helping to build the experience, please reach out and let me know, let Vicki know. There are so many ways to contact us. Please just reach out, take part. The second thing is we will always include an acknowledgement and a history of the land at our events. And then our third action item is that we are going to volunteer with organizations who are working on food justice that honors a more holistic, regenerative, and traditionally indigenous way of managing and working with the land. Basically, we promise to hush, pick up shovels, and get to work. We have a number that is about to be dropped in the chat. If you are in the US and Canada, you can text your zip code to this number and learn more about the land that you are on. And then to learn more about working with Twiggs Co. and to determine just how much we can do together with corporate social responsibility, radical collaboration, and beyond, contact us anytime. Again, Anna, Vicki, internet, literally wherever. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to present to you Hanoku Bathula and Nellie Binder, two brilliant people who have been willing to be on our panel today and talk about some really cool things that are a little bit tangible and tough to talk about sometimes. So to start off, if I may, we'll do some quick introductions. So Nellie.
All right, so I put in the chat, but I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts. I am currently an attorney and consultant at my own corporate impact practice, which is called Woven Impact Advisors. Prior to my work at Woven Impact, I was an attorney in the corporate social responsibility group at Ropes and Gray, which is a global law firm. So I learned a lot through that experience and bring with me that legal risk mindset into the work that I do, but couple it with creative consulting work and focus on sustainability. And Outside of my professional work, I volunteer with my local conservation commission, which is really fun work. And I serve as a plastic pollution ambassador for Five Gyres Institute. So just a quick elevator pitch, but you'll hear more from me.
That is incredible and cool. I love elevator pitches because I learn more about people all the time.
Yeah, I've been crafting mine for years.
Well done. All right, so over to you, Hanuku.
Good morning or good afternoon to all of you. It's early morning, 6 o'clock from New Zealand, Auckland. I'm originally from India. I came to New Zealand about 20 years ago, and I'm an academic in the university. I teach management and business and social responsibility as part of it. I got interested in sustainability many years ago as part of normal business teaching, business ethics, etc. But then the way we have gotten into the world where everyone has to contribute has changed my approach, and I focus on sustainability in everything that I do. And the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has come up with 2015 has provided the framework for everybody to be part of and contribute in the smallest way that's possible. And I mainly teach in master's program, marketing, and human resources management. Whichever way you take, sustainability goal 13 says we all have to be responsible in our consumption, responsible in our production. So therefore, I challenge my students to take up projects that can help sustainability in whatever way we could. So I'm here to share few views on what sustainability is to me personally, but I live in a country where there is huge focus on the land that we come from. We are very respectful to the Maori people here, and we have every meeting starts acknowledging the Maori people or the ownership and the contribution. And there is huge debate going on at the moment of the Resource Act and how Maori values tikanga has to be included. And tikanga incidentally happens to be part of sustainability. It's actually a word that is almost substitutable to word sustainability. That's how the Maoris live, and I'm glad to be part of that land and come to you and talk to you this morning.
That was very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we are going to start off with a presentation from Hanuku to get us started. For this, well, actually, for the entirety, unless the panelists have any particular aversion to this, because legal stuff and we're talking about governance on a pretty big scale can be very dense. What we're going to do for the format of this this episode of the series, we can call it, is if you have a question or if you hear something that is like, hold on, wait, so expect my hand to go up because things just plunk regularly. If anyone would like to be on camera and would raise their hand, or you can raise your hand in the reactions at the bottom of your screen. So whatever way works, but as we're going through, we're just gonna ask questions as it goes. And then I have a list of delightful questions to ask you both afterwards as well. So Hanuku, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, sure. Can you see that?
That's working.
Yeah. Yeah, these slides are just to help us discuss few things, and then anytime, as Anna said, we could stop and ask me questions, we could share. So I was trying to understand how legal side has become important in the modern world. And especially after I've seen the pictures from Afghanistan a couple of days ago of how hundreds of people are just chasing an aeroplane to get out, is actually a reaction to the unsustainable situation that is there. So the word sustainability has become so comprehensive. It is no longer about environment, it's about existence of human life. With that introduction, so I was looking at the academic aspects of sustainability. I suppose you know, there's a guy by name Archie Carroll in late 1990s. You know, he came up with a framework of 4 levels of hierarchy. When any new business is set up, they have to take care of economic responsibilities, make sure the business is viable. And then only it's viable, then make sure the business is not smuggling or anything dangerous to society, but also meets the legal requirements of that particular land in which the business is located or operated. And then the next one is ethical responsibilities. No, you're not required, but you do something more because it's expected by the society. So the right side, you find required by society. And then second one is also required by the society. Third one is expected, it's not required. And the last one is desired by society, philanthropic responsibilities when things go really wrong, and earthquakes and COVID, etc. And so the focus about sustainability and ethical responsibilities was only on the last two at the top. The first two were not considered to be aspects of sustainability in the previous thinking. But Carroll himself has written a paper in 2016, quite recently, and where he said, no, it's no longer the case of sustainability at the top, and it's not add-on, but it is something that runs through right from the beginning. So he said that ethics actually permeates the whole pyramid. And when you talk about ethics, they're very, very closely linked to legal system. What is legal, what is ethics today will become legal tomorrow. And examples are, we have codes, and codes of behavior become into laws, and then we follow them, and any violations are frowned upon. And so we have the same 4 levels, but now we are saying it's not just the top issues, but everything. And as Anna mentioned, the sustainability, the ethics has taken different forms. It is sustainability directly, but also corporate citizenship, stakeholder management. The moment you talk about stakeholder management, we're talking about the governance systems that are in place to make sure every stakeholder does contribute in a meaningful way. And there is an equilibrium of all the stakeholders. Again, we're talking about everybody in the society coming together to run a business or to make things happen. And also the created shared value for everybody. Now, what is in it for me? What you do impacts me, what I do impacts me. The COVID is the negative example. What somebody has done, some country affected the whole world, but we want to flip it around and say what we do, something good should affect the goodness of everybody else. And so conscious capitalism, as the last term indicates, brings in all people together. But there are ethical dilemmas. Again, this is an age-old question, goes back to Plato and Aristotle times, different viewpoints, and human beings have not changed. Still, there is selfishness, their own perspectives. The ethical relativism principle talks about following ethics and codes and guidelines that are relevant only to their context, and that's where we use the adage, be a Roman when you're in Rome. So you don't have to be a Roman in New Zealand or in US because it's not required. That is a view, but in a global world, that kind of approach is very narrow. We all have to work together, have a common ground. Otherwise, we'll end up into situations like what we see in Afghanistan. So what do? The ethical universalism approach says there are certain principles which are inalienable to human being. They are right everywhere. They can't be right in some places and wrong in some other places. They have to be right everywhere. Examples are human rights, labor laws for businesses, where it is sourced from, how are people involved in supply chain. So we bring in the other issues like global chain, the coffees that we drink, where do the seeds come from? Who actually worked them? Who actually packed them? What kind of pollution does it produce? And so to make sure to our own satisfaction, we brought in new systems in place like fair trade certifications. So it gives an assurance for us that things have gone through in a proper way. Zero emission goals and carbon footprints to make sure it doesn't travel too long. And then also buy local movements. Now, I think I split the word buy and local separately, but actually be local, buy local to reduce the carbon footprints. And labor laws applications, fair wages, and decent work. The last 2 words, I put them there together. They're actually the part of SDG goals, the global agenda. Fair wages and decent work has to be for everybody, everywhere in the world. Again, people might argue, oh, fair wages, and we can apply ethical relativism and say we can pay peanuts in one country and we can pay 100 times more in another country for the same job being done, which we don't accept. And then that takes us to the triple bottom line that we all have been listening for the last 3 decades in different ways. But then what aspects we look at triple bottom line actually has expanded over a period of time. Now we have used fair wages and well-being as part of the people, planet, and profit. So it's just not finances that have to be taken care of. We have to look into other aspects as well. Those of you from the business side would know there is a guy by name Kaplan, and so I think there is a trip. It just missed me. The same approach to measure finance performance. Now, don't look at only finances, but look at the other aspects as well. Recycling and zero emissions are there, but the reason why I put this slide is these are exactly three domains that are also part of the United Nations global agenda: social, economic, environmental. I was looking at the slides. It is exactly the same areas, and then the goals are actually could be segregated into three different categories: social, economic, and environmental. I looked at all these goals. What is missing is goal 16 and goal 17. And you find that social impact is end poverty, hunger, quality education, gender equalities. And within each of those things, there are actually legal aspects involved. So I'll finish off. Give me just one more minute. There is goal 16, which is not in the previous list here. Goal 16, if you dig in, you'll find there are some specific targets, and that talks about the rule of law at the national level, at the international level. So we need to bring in the labor laws in tune with the global requirements, or the resource laws to global requirements, or the supply chain to global requirements, reduce corruption, bribery in all forms, ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory, representative decision-making at all levels, and promote non-discriminatory laws and policies for sustainable development. These are just some legal aspects identified in 16, but you can also find them in gender equality, or and in good health, or in 8 global good jobs and inclusive economic growth and fair wages, in all and sustainable consumption. And there is evidence in the literature that businesses which are sustainable by can increase the profits by 20%. It means there is awareness in the customers that being responsible consumers actually is good for them and good for the business as well. So if we we tap into that aspect that consumers actually want to pay more, we lock them in and they provide what they want. So the last slide that I have here, I'm open for discussion after this, is that who should do what? Actually, everybody. What is stopping us from achieving sustainability? The only hurdle is ourselves, you and me and everybody here. We all can work one step at a time, remove each hurdle in whatever way we can to make our globe more sustainable and more livable and more happier. That's it from me.
We can't go yet because we still have a whole panel to do. That was fantastic. All right. Does anyone have any questions? That was a lot.
Yeah, I may add a comment. If we follow the laws, now we traditionally feel that we need good policies, and so we have an agenda as a kind of guiding principles. The problem is in implementation. Implementation takes guts. It requires political will. We may have otherwise sweet talk and no action. And the global business has actually found out that if they put too much emphasis on governance of sustainability from the places where they source their products, because they need to be transparent, what is happening is they're becoming counterproductive. Many of the big businesses, their suppliers in developing countries don't show up the people they hire. They offload the labor work to another company underneath, which nobody can see, and then they treat them as trash. And so because we wanted governance structures to follow, so the tick box is there, but the reality is not reflected.
Yeah, and I actually would love to add to that. A conversation I have often is it more useful for the market to regulate itself or to increase regulation in the corporate social responsibility space? And I've heard arguments on both sides, but this is kind of this philosophical question of, do we let consumers like ourselves, force business to change, and then through competition and just typical market practice sort of shift that way? Or do we approach it through law and policy? And so this is kind of a dilemma that I've talked a lot about with clients as well.
What is your opinion, Nikki?
It's, I mean, I would say a healthy mix of both, but
Yeah.
I think what's difficult about some of the regulation is, there's a lot of disclosure related regulations. So for example, the Modern Slavery Act out of the UK requires certain companies make disclosure around their modern slavery practices and what they're doing to combat modern slavery. And the idea behind it is, okay, it's just disclosure, right? So it doesn't require anything more than that. However, the idea behind it is that if a company needs to disclose something, they need to have something to disclose. So they should have some sort of program around combating modern slavery and compliance within their supply chain. And so the point of this disclosure legislation is that it forces companies to start thinking about it, knowing that they'll have to publicly disclose information and they need to have an actual program to disclose. I don't know if it always works that way in practice, but I have worked with clients that have said, okay, we're required to make these disclosures. Now we actually need to think about what we're doing so that we can properly disclose something. On the other hand, I've done a lot of peer benchmarking studies for clients. So that's just when clients are looking at competitors in their industry and trying to figure out, okay, what more can we be doing to be better kind of in our peer group. And so that's exclusive of regulations, it's exclusive of the law, but it's clients thinking about, okay, how can we be better based on market practice? So I've seen both sides and I've seen both work. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I too agree that's better mix of both. Both the pressure should come from both sides, both push and pull.
I agree.
How has this, when a company goes and is like, well, this is a requirement, this is a disclosure, are there support structures and programs to allow that company to not be starting completely from scratch, but have some sort of template? I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on this. It really depends on the regulation we're talking about. So I'll give another example aside from modern slavery disclosure. So in the United States, certain public companies are required to make disclosure around conflict minerals in their supply chains. And so if you're a new public company and you're subject to this disclosure requirement, what you can do typically is look at examples from other conflict minerals statements and sort of build yours on that. But for a lot of legislation, companies need to work with either external consultants or attorneys. That's a lot of the work I did at the law firm and even now. And it can get really complicated if you're not an attorney. It's honestly complicated even for me sometimes. And I've been working with this for a few years now. So a lot of companies do require external support because legislation is really dense and it's hard to parse out. First of all, are you even required to comply with it? And then if you are, how do you do so properly? So I don't know if that answers your question, but more often than not, it's pretty complex.
May I chip in? We do in New Zealand also focus on modern slavery issues, and mainly it's in the area of shipping. And in New Zealand, workers are treated well by and large. It's a good place to work. But the problem is when the shipping containers and vessels come to New Zealand waters, they may not follow the minimum standards. They have no minimum wage. The working conditions are very poor. They're being cheated. And the agents who hire them are actually not one agents, the agents and sub-agents, difficult actually to find out who is responsible for being mistreated and who for bringing those people to New Zealand waters. So we have brought in Modern Slavery Act in New Zealand as well. So there's one in UK, one in Australia, one in New Zealand. Now we have, the template is similar, but we make those employees come to New Zealand, fly them in, and make sure that the government is there behind them in their work. So that's how the template is the government role is there as a monitoring agency.
Okay. So either Hanuku or Nelly, or maybe both, if we were to, is there a way to summarize that Modern Slavery Act in like 5 sentences or less? I realize what I'm asking, guys. I'm sorry in advance.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm happy to. So I can just briefly say, so while broadly all of the modern slavery related disclosure legislation globally have a similar purpose and similar requirement that includes publishing typically an annual disclosure statement touching on certain subjects, and that kind of varies across different jurisdictions, but generally the disclosure requires certain companies to talk about how they're ensuring there's no modern slavery in their supply chain. So are they auditing suppliers? Do they go in person and interview suppliers to make sure that it's not happening? So basically requiring disclosure around how a company ensures that they're combating modern slavery in their supply chains. But when it gets to the nitty-gritty, all of the modern slavery legislation is kind of unique, especially with respect to what companies are required to comply. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, Hanoko. Maybe you have some more information, but
no, what you said is perfect. The idea is that the labor who are involved in working are treated respectfully. They're given fair wages, and the living conditions are good. So how do we ensure? Because in the third world, we find that they're exploited, and they're called sweatshops, and the people work from morning till night and just stay there as clog in the wheel and keep working, and they're being treated as inhuman in terms of how they're treated when they fall sick, etc. So this modern slavery prevents all those things, and then again that brings in back into our SDG agenda. So it fits in very well. That we all have to make sure. But the example that I gave about Bangladesh was that when there is auditing being done to obviate and to make sure that to give a good picture of tick boxes, the supply chain companies, the outsourcing companies actually further give that work to somebody else where we can't see what is happening. So that's how they to get around. That is when we need the society support and community support to check that we don't accept any such violations, not only by big companies, but even by small companies.
Nice. Okay. So that actually leads really beautifully into this next question. So Hanoku, and then Nelly, of course, if you have any answers, like please by all means. So starting with Hanoku, what frameworks can help guide us, like guide our actions towards sustainability? Because it's such a big, broad, like, how do I as a business owner in the United States look to make sure that my supply chains aren't committing these atrocities?
Well, that's a huge question, actually. Now, the Modern Slavery Act is one that we just now talked. It does help, but if you look at this Archie Carroll's ethical hierarchy, is a good structure to begin with, to see that we can actually work from top to see businesses actually do discretionary aspects. Maybe I can just show up that last slide, quite easy. I hope you can see it now.
Yep, perfect.
And so the thing is philanthropic aspects. No, we don't have to do it. Now something happens in Azerbaijan, so why do I care? Something happens in Wuhan, why do I care? No, we have to care. What happens in Wuhan does affect us. What happens in Afghanistan, Kabul affects us. So we have moved from being inward looking at this level in the past. Now we have become very active in this. And so in a way, all these things have come down to our purview on daily basis. So that is one framework that helps. Of course, triple bottom line is there that we have seen that also helps. But we also have the SDG. I think now I'm really excited to when I read SDGs more and more. Every time I read something, I read a target, I find, wow, the answer is here. Why do you have to look anywhere else? It's all here. So that's the approach that I take every time. So it is human life that is at the center of sustainability, and human life is not at the cost of planet or not the cost of society. We're all in together. So that is why we talk about sustainable development, which involves all three aspects. I can't be better if my environment around me is polluted.
Beautiful.
So that integrated approach is important.
I'll just quickly add to that. I completely agree with that. And if you want to get even more granular, I would recommend looking at SASB, which is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is a third-party framework that many companies use to create their corporate responsibility disclosure. But the reason why it's helpful, even if you're not planning, a massive CSR report, is because you can look by industry. And even within each industry, sometimes there are even more specific kind of sub-industry standards. And so that helps you think about, okay, if my company is in the extractives industry, what are sort of the material things that I should be considering when it comes to social impact or CSR? So that's just another helpful framework. And sometimes I take a look at SASB for a particular company, even if I'm not writing a report for them, but just so I can start thinking about, okay, what's really material to this particular business. So that's another helpful way to look at it as well. And I see Anna posted sasb.org. So yeah, that's really helpful. And you can look up by industry, and it's helped me a lot in the past.
And again, these frameworks that we have, fair trade certification by businesses, even if companies don't go and get the certificate as such, looking at the aspects that they need to do to comply with the requirements itself, by itself will allow them to move into the sustainability sphere, to make them more responsible. So the items that are there will definitely help. Again, another point that we just now heard is about each industry maybe is different. Healthcare is different, mining is different, banking is different. So whatever is possible in that industry, I think we need to do. I like the term peer benchmarking that was used. I think that's very, very useful. Each industry can evolve its own standard and learn from each other. But the idea is that they need to be committed towards working toward, for sustainability.
Very true. I know Vicky and I, in writing out our corporate responsibilities and documents, one of the things that we did is we went to the B Lab, the B Corp assessment website, and they have a B Lab that you can take for free. And so we were just pulling governance statements that were required to be able to certify as a B Corp. And we're like, oh, well, this will work for our corporate books perfectly.
It's a great idea.
That was helpful. Okay, so leading into that, Nellie, based on your experience, what corporate responsibility, legal considerations should companies be thinking about?
Yeah, so we've already touched a little bit on this. And like Hanuku mentioned, sustainability has taken on a wide range of meaning. And I think in your presentation, you mentioned that it runs the whole gamut of the global supply chain, which is very true. And so there are, many different directions this answer can go in because it's so broad. But when you think about, say, human capital management, for example, legal considerations might include equal opportunity employment, fair labor and wages standards, like Hanuku mentioned, and so on. And then when you move to a supply chain perspective, companies need to think about certain human rights requirements. We mentioned the UK Modern Slavery Act, the California Transparency and Supply Chains Act is another one. So thinking about human rights, kind of broadly, not just modern slavery, but what else that could mean, including appropriate working conditions. And even aside from that, thinking about the supply chain, looking at corruption and bribery, local labor laws. And then from the environmental side, again, like Hanuku mentioned, thinking about what are environmental regulations that could be very industry dependent. But for example, if you own a factory somewhere, thinking about are you working with any toxic chemicals and where do they go after you're done with them? So that goes back to the fact that sustainability is incredibly broad. And so it's really useful for an organization when thinking about legal considerations to, first of all, work it with an attorney, but second of all, to consider what is specific to their industry, to their business, and to where they're located. So what restrictions and what regulations apply to that business particularly. And so, yeah, it's very broad, but I hope that kind of gives just a general sense of kind of the different areas that you can go in when it comes to CSR and legal considerations.
Nice. Thank you for that. Okay, so to both of you, because you both have this beautiful international experience and having to find the balance in the communication between ethical dilemmas and relativism and universalism, like Hanuku was saying, and how do you work with that across varying cultures and languages, all of the things? Hanuku, let's start with you, and then we'll pop over to Nelly.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a very big question, because you're talking about how do people behave in different countries, what guides the behavior. It's really, really difficult question, but then now we no longer live in different countries. We live in a global community. And therefore, we can no longer say, oh, we do what is right in our country. That parochial view has to give way to the global view, because what happens in one country, as we have recently seen, does affect. So we are part of global community. So what is ethical in one country has to be ethical in other countries too. Maybe for practical reasons, you could have a bit of a leeway, bit of a bandwidth for people to wiggle up and down a little bit, but you can't have completely different standards in the modern world. That's my view.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think where I've seen this come up most is when it comes to the supply chain. Because companies located in the United States might have suppliers located in a different country where culture is different, standards are different, laws are different. And so I've grappled with this quite a bit where, maybe a US-based company is trying to figure out a way to work with a supplier in another country where their standards are completely different. And so, a really good way to sort of fix that, I guess, or to work through that is to work with people on the ground in that country. Sometimes our mentality in the United States might be very different from mentality elsewhere and vice versa. And so the best way to do that is to work with local individuals, go on the ground, understand what the regulations are, what the culture is, what the standards are, to help kind of reconcile that disparity in understanding.
Okay, so quick.
Yeah, I may add, now, if I can understand if small companies try to take advantage of different wage standards and exploit them by shifting their production location there. But then how do we accept if companies like Amazon, which is a global company, also does the same thing, tries to exploit people in different countries wherever it is possible, squeeze them out. People in New Zealand are paid one rate, people in Germany are paid another rate, and people in India, they have gone on strike recently saying that we need to be paid better. Amazon says, no, forget it. We have more people in India who we can hire, so we don't have to worry. So the big companies don't set standards. And in fact, I was angry, and I think I'm adding my own personal agenda here. I was angry when I read Amazon CEO said, oh, thank you for the sacrifices that my workers have made to send me to space. No, I don't think workers have made any sacrifices to send their CEO to space by accepting less wages.
Yeah, and I think, right, maybe other more socially responsible companies, something I've worked on quite a bit is a variety of corporate policies. So a lot of organizations will have a supply chain policy or a human rights policy, and typically it's drafted in a way that it applies to all of their tier 1 suppliers. And so the idea is that the company kind of sets a baseline standard for fair labor standards, other human rights standards, even access to water is often included in human rights policies. And so the idea is that organizations have the power as customers of suppliers to help guide standards. And, that's something I've worked on quite a bit. And I think this is sort of still a growing space, but it can be a good avenue for companies as customers or as consumers to sort of pressure suppliers in different countries that maybe don't have as strong of fair labor standards.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I really appreciate what you said. The insights are good. The issue is that as you have standards to be declared, the problem is some of those big companies and the suppliers go off radar to do those bad practices. They're not visible on the document.
Yeah.
So I just want to show you the comment that this guy has made. Jeff Bezos has thanked Amazon employees and customers for paying for his trip to space. I said, did I? I don't know. Did I pay?
Was there an opt-out option that I'd missed?
And then you don't pay my regular salary. Minimum wage are not given. Don't allow for a voice. But then you say I paid for his space trip.
Okay, so anyone watching this recording or listening now, please, dear God, talk to your stakeholders and just instead of making gross assumptions like that. So audience, be prepared. I'm about to ask and see if you have any questions yet. But the question that I have before that, because I'm moderating this panel, is getting on the ground is like great if you can do it. Do either of you or have either of you had any experience with people who are running small businesses or don't have the option to travel to places like India or Bangladesh or whatever productions in New Zealand? What are there virtual options that we can look at to see that we're not outsourcing to awful places? What has been your experience? We'll start with Nellie.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. And what I've seen smaller companies do is hire what they call auditors from that particular country and kind of have them go on the ground so that a small business owner who might not have the resources to fly across the world, will just hire someone on the ground and kind of to report back and conduct research and interviews at the facility or supplier and kind of get information that way. I have had experiences, maybe because I worked at a law firm. So sometimes we had more like when there's already been an issue, that's when clients would come to us where the information wasn't reliable. And so when it's coming from a third-party source, you don't always know if it can be trusted. And I honestly don't think I have a solution for this yet. I think it's a problem that a lot of smaller companies grapple with, companies that are not Amazon and don't have, infinite resources to move across the world and check their suppliers. And I think it's a real concern. So I don't unfortunately have a good answer for you. Maybe Hanoku does.
No, I fully agree with the concern that you shared. And even as I was talking, I just clicked into a website which says 42 most ethically and sustainable clothing brands from Australia and New Zealand. Exactly the same thing that we heard. We need an auditor in the companies who can actually go and see and verify and certify and say these are good people, these are good working conditions, this is where the cotton is sourced from, and then they're shipped to countries where they're used for manufacturing. But the problem is we go by trust of the auditor's report on the ground. And then we expect, just as we are, for them to be open and honest in their reports, in what they do and what they actually practice and what they record and what they tell us. On the other side, to support such initiatives, consumers like you and me had to be prepared to pay a little bit more as part of our contribution towards social responsibility and consumption practices. So pay another 10-15%. So there are companies in New Zealand, clothing companies, which source cotton from Bangladesh, Fiji, and other places where they're treated well. So if somebody says this is sourced from places where workers are treated better, so I feel like buying those brands, and I pay a little bit more money, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30% more than I would do. So it doesn't make difference for me whether I pay $20 or $25 if I know that I'm paying extra $5 for somebody else, which I buy once in a month or so. It's equal to cup of coffee for me. So that is what I can do as an individual, as a buyer, as a customer, but also make sure the process is documented, and the trust is very important. So you may have to have an auditor and have another auditor to check the auditors. So that becomes an issue.
Nice. Thank you both for both of that, for all of that. Any questions from the audience? Watching boxes.
Okay, I'll give another example meanwhile as people talk. I teach a course for master's students, and then the capstone course is to give them experience of working on a company and solve their problem, mainly usually how do you export to other countries. I'm searching for a company, and I found one. That company was started in 2017 in New Zealand, and it is an underwear company, both for men and women. Started with women and then men. That's the only thing they do. But why does it interest me? Because it is started by a lawyer. Number two, it started using refugees as workers. So people who come to New Zealand as refugees on United Nations programs, so they're vulnerable sections, they needed help. So they are the people who actually are the workers in that company. And so that is, if I buy those underwears, I'm contributing to the livelihood of the refugees who are settling in this country. So that conscious decision-making on the part of consumers and workers is what is required in every aspect that we do in this world to make things better.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dr. Nick, you have a question?
Hi, everybody. To play into this Simpsons reference, if anyone gets it. I really enjoyed our panelists' discussion about legal issues, and my disclaimer before I ask this question is that I'm not versed well in legal issues, with the, I guess, exception of intellectual property, because I have some experience in that as a researcher. But my question is more rooted around the idea that the law often has to play catch up with science and technology advancements. A very obvious example in current events is cryptocurrency. Most senators don't even know how to use Facebook. So how are we going to regulate something like cryptocurrency? But these examples exist in the tangible world with real products and real currencies and all the sort of things that the real world's rooted in. One example I think is in science and technology innovation, where sometimes the most profitable response to a consumer safety issue or another type of problem that emerges is just a witty tweak on an existing product or process that may eventually be deemed just as bad, if not worse, than the original in 5 to 10 years when the law and regulations catch up to that. One example that I'm personally familiar with is that I used to work for a chemical company that was making BPA and then BPA replacements. So those who are familiar with bisphenol A, BPA, it was a lining additive that was used in shatterproof plastics like Nalgene bottles, soup cans, and other things like that. It turned out to be an endocrine disruptor, and they phased it out and replaced it with BPA replacements that I know firsthand were just tweaks on the original BPA molecule. They were able to be patented. They were able to be rolled out in a very seamless fashion in large-scale chemical manufacturing. And then 8 years later, the NIH publishes a report that says they're just as bad, if not worse, endocrine disruptors than the original ones. But there was no way to regulate them. They were trade secreted molecules. They were things that the EPA had to sort of, reverse engineer to figure out what the hell was in these new products. And this is a problem of ethics, and one that the law is not able to catch on to. And we see so many examples of this in sustainability. So, just to get some impressions from our panelists, what do we do about the ethical legal gap? And how do we try to innovate with these things in mind, even when the law may not tell us to innovate in such a way?
Yeah, I'm happy to just quickly respond, and I completely agree with you. We've seen this, like you said, in a range of fields, from healthcare to technology and in sustainability as well. And I think what it really comes down to is, in the beginning, what I talked about, sort of the market regulating itself versus policy and regulations just being too slow, and more responsive rather than dealing with concerns before it actually happens. And so I think that comes back to the fact that as consumers, if we do our research, we can make decisions for ourselves and help to shift the market in that way. If enough consumers decide to buy from brands that source sustainable cotton, for example, we'll be able to make a shift in the market, and other companies will be forced to catch up, not because of law, but because there's too much competition and they're not selling enough product. So it's kind of unfortunate, but I think the problem with legislation is that it is so slow, not only to be introduced, but even to pass a law is just, it's such a process. Whereas as consumers, we can band together and make purchasing decisions relatively quickly. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I completely agree. And I think it's just, that's how law and policy work in this country and around the world. You know, there were recently mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence legislation presented in Germany. And it's taken, I think, years at this point for it to just even, you know, push through German parliament. And it just takes such a long time. So I think we just need to advocate for ourselves and push the market a certain way.
Yeah, my comment is also the same, on the same lines. Is very true. Market will decide, but which one does what at what point will vary. Sometimes market actually takes the pressure, and somebody takes the initiative in getting things done. When you say market, people like you and me, the conscious consumers, that I'm using the term deliberately. So where do you get the consciousness from? From the people that we study with, we work with, we interact with. They are the ones who actually sensitize us about sustainability. And if you're in that group of people, then we'll always be having that lens whenever we make a decision to purchase goods, etc. But the example that Nick gave, the company which came up with a new substitute product and which is equally bad, you know, we need companies to be honest and open and really believe what they're doing is true. But if they want to exploit, coming with the selfish approach, the traditional approach, then that is actually is inconsistent with the modern way of sustainability, that where everybody has got a stake. You know, it's a stakeholder approach rather than shareholder approach. So each of us have got a role.
And I want to touch on one of the questions in the chat, if that's okay.
Please do. Perfect.
So there's a question from Salma about, you know, the notion of letting the market regulate itself, if that perpetuates greenwashing. And to some degree, I believe it does. But I think the antidote to some degree to that is getting real quantitative data from companies and real transparency, not just marketing ads and campaigns and images of trees on their website, but really getting actual quantitative data, understanding not just, oh, we're diverse, but really, what does that mean? What are the percentages? What are the numbers? And being able to have comparable data to compare across companies and understand what's really going on. So less storytelling and more data, I think, is kind of an antidote to greenwashing, but it's a real problem too. So I do agree that fully allowing the market to regulate itself is not an answer.
That's right. Okay. So thank you, Nellie. I know we only have you for a few more minutes. So would you mind telling the people watching, how can we get in touch with you? How can we engage more?
Sure. So I'm available. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think I put in my LinkedIn information. You can send me an email at nelliebinder@wovenimpact.com. I think I've put that in the chat as well. And I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations with anyone. I am available just to chat, but also for consulting services. So, you know, whatever you want to talk about, I'm very open. I really enjoy talking about this stuff. So feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to keep the conversation going. And I apologize, I have to jump off. in a minute or two. But before I do, I'm just going to take 2 seconds to answer one more question in the chat that I just saw, also from Salma, if that's okay.
Yeah,
just really quickly. So you asked, I'd love to know if legal advisors advise about just compliance or also ESG strategies. So I do both. So even as an attorney at my previous law firm, I had my legal practice, which really focused on this global legislation that I talked about, from modern slavery to human rights due diligence. But a very large part of my practice was just advising on strategy, benchmarking, roadmaps, things like that, that weren't really always grounded in legal concepts. So it's very much a mix of both, and I continue to do that in my current practice as well. So that's a very quick answer to that question, but I just wanted to address it before I jumped off.
Nice. Thank you very much. Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Nelly before she jumps? No? Pretty good. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to you share your knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free to do so.
Nice. Have a good day.
You too.
Everybody else stay. Don't go anywhere. Cool. Okay, so Anoku, I would really like to get your thoughts on that. One of the questions that Nelly just answered about market forces and market self-regulation. So from two different angles. One is just your general thoughts, and then two, what have you seen that has worked well in the world?
Yeah. So one is actually the consumers becoming conscious, but when you say consumers, it is a society that is reflected in the consumers. There are some, again, I endorse the view that data has to speak, and the data is by number of ways to find what the society feels. There are surveys that are being done regularly in New Zealand and Australia, and they found that nearly 66 or 7% of Australians are conscious about the responsibilities towards sustainability, and therefore they are willing to be consumers who could actually pay a little bit more towards buying things that are sustainable or contribute towards sustainability. So the more the society is sensitized towards sustainability, the better consumers we will have, because consumers are part of the society, and the market we have that responds to the sustainability issues. Sadly, one of my colleagues is doing research, and she called top managers from China and India. I said, hey, have you heard of sustainability? No. Have you heard of SDGs? No. Have you heard of, so some people said yes. Okay, if you have heard about sustainability and labor laws and about fair pay practices, do you follow them? No, I heard, but we don't. It doesn't apply to us. It is only for rich countries, not for poor countries. Now we need to provide salaries to people, jobs to these people. If you follow them, we cannot afford to run the business here, so we don't care. So there are two levels. One is people being aware and not following. The bad situation is people don't even know about it, and they don't even follow or don't even bother. So that is the ground reality in some of the countries. But in countries like Australia and New Zealand, there we are really socially conscious about sustainability. So what happens is we can become the leaders that impact the global chain. So when our consumers source goods, the consumers buy goods from companies that source goods from the developing countries, they can make a statement saying that we want goods only, those goods that are produced using sustainable methods. Otherwise, we don't want to pay. So market has to speak. If people don't speak up, market doesn't speak up, then we can't actually make progress. So we need a conscious consumer and conscious society, and a committed society, committed leadership, and we also need champions locally in different areas who could actually keep the discussion going. That's when the society can contribute.
Okay, cool. Heads up, audience, I have a couple of questions for you coming up soon. Thank you for that answer. Then that leads to the next question, and potentially the final question of this interview is, so you keep talking about the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Are there any goals that can be more specific in providing guidance in the legal aspect of how we promote sustainability through them?
Is it addressed to me?
So
is it me? Is
Yep.
it me that okay, yeah, it's true. I think I mentioned about goal number 16 and then put some targets in the slide, which specifically mentions about the legal systems and the governance and the codes. And there is also sustainable development goal, which talks about decent work. So decent work also talks about having proper laws. And there's also another goal, which is about gender equality, which also talks about treating women and men equally, and that in the context of payment. So it's just not only from the workers' point of view, but in the society that live in, different codes have to come. So the 16 one, I think I may be able to show if it is still there. It gives a good example. 1 second. Yeah.
While you're doing that, how detailed do they get? Do they define what good means? Like, what is a fair wage?
No, they don't define, because each country has got its own standards, right? So they don't define. But I think sustainable development. So this 16 is not here, but we have, I think, in this slide, gender equality. Gender equality is where, if you look at the targets within that, I think I'll see if I can put some link there. We have some guidance there. We have good jobs and inclusive economic growth. There is some guidance there, and this fair wages and is also covered. And also we have something here. There's not 16 is not mentioned here. 16, 17. So 16 actually talks about promote the rule of law at the national and international levels to ensure justice, equal justice to everybody. And then second one is to reduce corruption and bribery in all forms. Again, we are talking about the codes. Now the US has got the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that came up in 1977, which has got the effect of extraterritoriality, which means the effect is binding not only on the US territory, but binding on all US companies that operate outside US. So they can't actually give bribes to people in Nigeria, India, saying that, oh, we are not giving bribes in US, we're giving bribes in Nigeria, India. No, that law says, no, we set the standard, we behave like this wherever we are in the world. So, and then OECD has come up with other set of codes. So this is actually attracting or requiring every person in the world, every organization in the world to come together to promote rule of law. How we actually do in each case, yeah, there is modern slavery law in UK, modern slavery law in Australia and in New Zealand. But if there is a modern slavery law in India and China and Nigeria, then I would say, yeah, we made progress. It's easy to may have those laws in UK, Australia, and New Zealand, but not in Nigeria, not in Vietnam, not in China. If you can bring in those countries to have those laws and also implement them in letter and spirit, then we'll make progress. But till then, the big companies, the big countries can be the leaders and make sure that they deal with only companies and countries that follow those standards. That's how we can champion the world and be the leaders to make sure everybody complies with them. Either they follow or they're out of the system. I don't know if you've gone that far as yet.
I mean, kind of. So like one of the things that is just as an example in my life is as a consumer, I completely closed down all of my Bank of America accounts because they are choosing to finance Enbridge's Line 3 pipeline, which is going to cause, they've estimated $73 billion in damage. And so divesting in ways like that, like, I think unfortunately, kind of like what you guys were mentioning is it's a bit up to us. Like we have to do research and then pressure our legislators or run for office. And then also give feedback to the companies that exist, because they have to know that we're complaining about things. I have a friend who works in Coca-Cola, and for the longest time, they had no idea that that their plastic bottles were an issue. So
no one told them.
Right. And then people told them, and now they're spending a lot of money working on compostable alternatives. So with the crowd, go ahead. Did you have something to say? Hanuko?
Say that again.
Did you want to mention something?
Oh, no, I think the SDG 17 is one about partnership, the last one. So that's where we can actually form a coalition of companies and organizations across, like me in New Zealand and you in US, or somebody from UK. We know we are partnering on an issue to be the leaders to drive home certain values, and so that they can be internalized by people who participate and then take them back to the respective communities.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. Oh man, I remember the first session that you came to. We'll put on that. that was so cool. Anyway, in the comments, there's a little bit of a conversation going on about how the research aspect is really frustrating. And so like, we're just normal people trying to make it through the day. Do you have any advice as far as how not to drive yourself crazy doing all this research and trying to find good data?
There are companies which actually are focused on collecting the data and giving it to us. Now, we can't actually go and collect the data. It's difficult for small companies. Large companies can do. They have their own planning units, own data analytics. So the data is everywhere for big companies, and small companies have things that are able to access now in terms of online consumer reviews, and then ongoing apps that are there that collect the data from the workers. They can give feedback. 360 degrees feedback used to be once a year. Now it is almost instantaneous. People work and then give their reviews, not only as customers, but also as workers. So that ongoing dialogue on everyday basis will actually give us better information than otherwise we'll have to do the catch up thing if we wait for people to tell us much later. But it is actually a challenging question because data means additional cost. We have to include that as part of the operating costs. But if you have the conscious consumer, we know that we can focus on them and be the leader. And then I'm using the phrase peer benchmarking. So we, as a leader, we can actually influence others in the industry to raise the standards in that industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I just put a link in the chat as a way of getting feedback to companies, and you can actually see it's an app, and you can actually see when those companies respond to you, and it goes directly to the CEO, not necessarily to the rest of the chain. Nice, exactly, Ree. Let's see, Nick, do you have a comment about researching?
Yeah, so I think we've all probably seen a lot of companies come forward, especially in the last year and a half, with plans for their net zero carbon by 2050 vision. And, you know, I think that those are efforts that largely should be applauded. Congratulations on waking up. But there's also, you know, some marketing that goes into those statements and those plans. And if you really read between the lines on some of those plans, you know, for example, some of these petroleum producers are, you know, basically calculating net zero in these plans by assuming devastating land grabs from indigenous groups for carbon offset purposes. I mean, that's a huge red flag, but you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you read page 694 of the 800-page plan. And like we were just talking about, it is overwhelming for consumers, I think, to really find those details themselves and not just necessarily rely on what the website and the picture of the, you know, child holding soil with its sprout coming out of it is saying and telling them. So there's just, you know, a lot that's buried in there that I have a PhD in chemical engineering, and I have to sometimes squint at these details and try and understand exactly how a company is claiming to get to net zero. And on that note too, True zero is not the same as net zero. There is an overwhelming emphasis in marketing on net zero, and not all nets are created the same. You could, for example, purchase offsets while still being a massive, polluter and achieve a net zero. We should really be emphasizing and demanding as consumers a true zero. And that is much, much harder to achieve. And it's a phrase that's often conflated with net zero. Just another comment in terms of things we could consider as consumers in researching.
Oh man, the waters just continue to get muddy. I think that's actually, so that's an important, for anyone on this call and anyone watching the recording, I think this is also really important for us to realize as consumers, is that sustainability is an evolving field. We are an evolving species. The way that our economy and our society interacts is clearly skewed incorrectly, and we are working to figure out how to skew it in a different direction that's more just holistically beneficial for all. So as we are going through this research, one of the things that I have found really helping myself is realizing that we're in a journey. And in this journey, sometimes it takes a little while to figure it out. So one of the things is give yourself grace to realize, like, okay, well, I thought this was a really good sustainable product, but it actually turns out it's awful. And then just allow that to happen. And if you have the space to recover from that kind of heartbreak, and then email the CEO or tag them on Twitter or Instagram or something like that and be like, hey, don't be dicks. I don't need to feel bad because you're a dick. So like, it's a marketing campaign that we'll have coming out eventually. Having that space and that grace to allow yourself to be able to move through the system, and then having that space and forgiveness for yourself allows you space, or what I've noticed is it allows more space to then be able to interact with that system and be like, hey, I caught you. Don't do that. And then that's how we make these much larger shifts, is we do that. And then we tell our friends, like, hey, go drunk dial Ted Cruz or something, Good.
Yeah, good point. From my side, being an academic, the starting point would be to see if my graduates actually are getting into the industry, into the businesses, into managerial roles as conscious as they ought to be in the area of sustainability. Are they simply going there to exploit and increase the profit of the company? So actually, I'm doing a bit of a small study in my university to see how much of awareness is there among the final year undergraduate students before they step out in the last few months about sustainability, whether they want to practice it in their personal lives, whether they want to actually increase their employability based on that, whether they can actually use sustainability as part of their behavior. That is what I'm trying to do. And sadly, some results are actually not that promising. Some people don't know. And they know sustainability, but not much about sustainable development goals. How they want to use it in practical terms, they're not very clear. So, and my colleague has done a study on managers, they don't know. So if managers don't know, if students don't know, we're in bad shape. But I think we all have to start somewhere and start working. So that's why I joined this webinar, because you're doing your part and I do my part. We all can do our part together.
Absolutely. On that note, are there any questions from the audience? Are there any encounters with sustainability from the legal side? Has anyone encountered somewhere where they couldn't do something that was values aligned and would have been better because of some weird mandate or legal issue? One example would be, for a while, in the US, we couldn't give out leftover food unless it was in very specific packaging to homeless people, because then if anyone got sick, it would directly come back and get you. Anyone?
That's a good example, but I know companies, the legal system says you need to give, I think in India, 1% of their sales turnover or profit towards corporate social responsibility. But companies misuse it and then use that 1% to construct roads and other infrastructure facilities in around their own factories. And so basically they're benefiting themselves. So they stop it. But your example is, I think, powerful. When you want to help, you're not allowed to help because of the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there could be many examples where we don't do what we can, and simply we have the we have to actually watch food being thrown in the rubbish when there are hungry people next door.
Mm-hmm.
That's heart-wrenching.
Yeah, that one, that's a burn the system down moment for sure. Oh wait, I said that on recording. Just kidding. So do you know, Hanoko, do you know if so we've talked about SASB, we've talked about a couple of other certifications, but is there anything that's really good for calling organizations out for greenwashing or helping hold feet to the fire of truth?
I think it's a social movement. I think different people in different countries are actually calling out. Isn't that I to the best of my knowledge, I don't know if there's one single organization that's doing, but different people in the different countries actually do point out to greenwashing or tokenism just for sake of doing it. And then we also have to give credit to companies. Sometimes they do honest mistakes and then they immediately correct them when they're pointed out to them. But I don't know if there's any big organization globally except companies like, organizations like Greenpeace and few organizations. Greenpeace is one that I know, but it's always viewed with a bit of pinch of salt, saying that the agenda is different, big, and not really helping the organizations. There's too narrow focus. That's what some companies have concern with Greenpeace. But there's one large organization at that scale is Greenpeace.
Okay. Yeah, and that speaks to the need for those of us who are in the positions of being aware of these things to step up and actively be the change. So know how the SDGs can apply in your world. If you have any questions on that, let me know, let Vicky know. We've got you. And it's being aware of these things. So how can we as people directly dismantle the systems of colonialism and this extractive capitalism and these patterns that we know are destructive? What can we do to step up and break that pattern so that way that stops with us? I think this, like, oh yeah, something else on the to-do list, but we get to do it. We get to dismantle the systems. And that I will go on record to say. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So with that, afterwards, we'll stick around a little bit, but I want to make a little bit of space to thank you, Hanoko. This has been absolutely phenomenal. Love the information that you've shared, and the perspective that you bring to this conversation is excellent and elegant. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure, and thanks for having me as part of your team. Although I'm geographically so distant from you, but yeah, I feel so connected. Yeah,
we are on the same planet, as it turns out. No, there's no escape, really.
I know.
Okay, so for ways to get involved with us, there are several. Twiggs Co is very much about being stakeholder driven, and so that puts us in the community quite a bit. I'm going to hand it over to Vicki Davis to talk about the Green Team Academy, which is how you take an idea, a thought, fill a gap, or whatever, and then measure impact from it in 90 days or less. Not even kidding. That's not just the tagline. So, Vicki, take it away.
Thank you again, Hanoko, for the time that you took to inform us on how to be a little bit more ethical, a little bit more legal in our practices. As Anna mentioned, the Green Team Academy is working on an international climate challenge. So if you're like, what can I do? The problems are so big. We're working with the Green Team Academy to have this 90-day challenge. So planting trees, picking up trash, organizing something, making an apiary, registering people to vote, contacting your legislation, whatever that might be. This is an international challenge that really helps you make actual change in 90 days. Last year, they had like 145,000 trees were planted globally, tens of thousands of pounds of trash were planted, 156,000 voters were like contacted globally. And so really it's a way of everyday people making a change. And we're really excited about this nonprofit, helping them get more teams, helping them be an ambassador advocate. So if you're interested in something like that, please check them out. You can contact me. I can connect you with them as well. But this is just everyday people across the globe making change. There's a team in Yemen planting trees, and there is a war going on there. So they have some time. they found time to their goal is to plant like 5,000 trees. So you can make change, and really excited about this nonprofit and what they're doing. So please contact me if you have some questions. I can connect them, or you can just check out their website that I put into the chat on how to make change in 90 days.
Thank you very much. All right, so some of the other things that you can do is we as an organization are constantly out in the community. So we have an Eventbrite. So we're actually going to be wrapping up the next steps to sustainability as a series within the next 2 sessions. So we have this one, we have our next session, which is about keeping sustainability sexy, because of course we know it is. However, how do you talk about it? And how do you get that message out there? So we have someone from I'm going to try this one, Denver Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resilience. Nailed it. The longest names ever here in Denver, I swear to God. So we have someone from there. We have someone who does really good nonprofit storytelling. And actually, we have 2 people who do really good nonprofit storytelling as well. So join us. Surprise, it'll be on the 17th of September. We have that going on. If you would like and want to and are on Instagram, please follow us there. We're practicing how to manage social media accounts. Please give us grace. Vicky and I are both elder millennials who grew up outside. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, please follow us, engage with us, keep in touch. And if you have any questions about anything, reach out to us. There are no stupid questions, although we might answer you with a pun and a dad joke, and then actually answer you for real. Because we can, and why not? And dad jokes are fun. Okay, so with that, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, or if there's any way that we can support you, you boxes, please let us know. And let's see, well, you are all released. I'm going to stop the recording.